In its first 2 years, it's no secret that the AEW women's division has been the subject of some completely valid and sometimes invalid criticisms. Now, whether you want to lay the blame at the feet of specific individuals, the network, plain old bad luck, or a combination of everything, you end up in the same place. AEW has needed to do a better job of presenting its female talent. At various points over the past 2 years, there have been criticisms of the women only getting one short segment on Dynamite, usually in the 9:20 to 9:30 p.m. Eastern slot, of matches being thrown together with no story, of a lack of roster depth and TV-ready talent, of championship challengers disappearing after their title matches, and of champions themselves simply not being featured or mentioned on the show on a consistent basis. But in recent months, it seems like the company has heard the criticisms, are making more of the right moves, are finally getting some luck on their side, and are starting to reap the rewards of putting consistent effort into their women's division. And while we're in no danger of AEW becoming Stardom anytime soon, we're at least in a place where we're getting some characters and stories we can confidently invest in. I'm Rivenblade, and today I'm looking at how the AEW women's division has been turning things around. March 17th, 2021, AEW Dynamite St. Patrick's Day Slam, the lights out match between Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa. Arguably, this was the show and the match that got the AEW women's division on the map. It proved that the division could main event an episode of Dynamite and draw viewers. Thunder Rosa would come out on top after a brutal war, and the match garnered critical acclaim from across the wrestling world, positioning Baker and Rosa as two of AEW's top acts. This was inarguably the match that made both wrestlers, and the match that got the hopes up of everyone who had been rooting for the division to get a bigger spotlight. This was it. This was the turning point, right? Well, as the months went on, the division was still often relegated to the same time slot and a single segment of the show, but bubbling just beneath the surface of everything was the continued rise of Britt Baker, who, despite losing to Thunder Rosa in the Lights Out match, came out as the main bloodied face of that battle. She started climbing the ranks by getting wins on Dark, and eventually positioning herself as the top contender for then-champion Hikaru Shida's AEW title. Baker won the belt at Double or Nothing 2021 and promised a new era which would be marked by 3 letters, DMD. And despite a bit of a rocky start, which included Nyla Rose ruining Britt's championship celebration by popping a bunch of balloons and flipping a tray of burgers, Britt's reign and the women's division in general really started turning a corner with the debut episode of AEW Rampage. Britt Baker main evented that show as well in her hometown of Britsburg, besting face-turned-heel for a night Red Velvet. And this is where we start seeing things slowly turning around and where the division starts addressing some of its most consistent criticisms. 1. The women's division only gets one segment per week on Dynamite in a predictable time slot. Well, since the addition of 60 minutes of Rampage, the women's division has consistently gotten 2 matches per week, one on Dynamite and one on Rampage, and it has consistently had more than one segment on Dynamite per week. Never mind that, as of this recording, AEW Women's Champion Britt Baker has been in a television main event 3 times over the course of 3 months. Could things and should things be better? Absolutely. I champion the idea of the women now being good enough to have 2 matches on Dynamite per week, but progress has been made in this area, and the division doesn't feel like an afterthought. 2. There aren't enough stories being told outside of the title picture. Since the debut of Rampage, and especially since All Out 2021, we've seen multiple stories and characters getting a focus in the division. Over the past few months, we've gotten to see the continued rise of the prideful and arrogant Jade Cargill, the heated competitive rivalry between Hikaru Shida and Serena Deeb, the explosive arrival and continued rise of Ruby Soho, the faction feud between Penelope and the Bunny against Ty Conti and Anna Jay, the slow build of Thunder Rosa, and the announcement of the TBS title and the TBS title tournament. There is a lot going on, and just having something else to fight for should help the division to continue growing and getting a chance to shine. Of course, not every story and feud has been a hit, as work does need to be done to better establish the characters and motivations of some women in the division, but we have to give credit where credit is due. There are more stories being told, and that's already a step in the right direction. 3. The roster isn't deep enough and doesn't have enough TV-ready talent. So, the pandemic restricted travel for Riho, and key injuries to Kris Statlander, Anna Jay, and Serena Deeb had a significant impact on the division for significant chunks of 2020 and 2021. However, Statlander, Anna Jay, and Deeb are back, and there has been an influx of talent since the pandemic started. Jade Cargill, Red Velvet, Jamie Hayter, Ruby Soho, and the official signing of Thunder Rosa have boosted a division that already included Layla Hirsch, Nyla Rose, Hikaru Shida, Tai Conti, and more. One of the implications of the roster depth argument is that the division doesn't have enough TV-ready talents. However, looking over the AEW roster page and what we've seen on TV lately, that's no longer the case. We've seen good to great TV matches between Deeb and Shida, Hayter and Ruby Soho, Conti and Shida, Statlander against Hayter and Rebel, and others. The talent is there now. It's just a matter of utilizing them well and continuing to give them television exposure. 4. Championship challengers disappear after losing. This has been one of my major pet peeves. After Penelope Ford had a breakout performance against Hikaru Shida in 2020, it seemed like she was primed to take on a bigger role, but she just seemed to vanish off TV for I don't even remember how long. The same thing happened with Tai Conti, who also had a fantastic match against Hikaru Shida, only to disappear off TV. These are just two examples, and they were why I was paying very close attention to the treatment of Ruby Soho after her loss to Britt Baker at AEW Grand Slam. Well, I'm happy to report that Ruby Soho has continued to be a regular fixture on AEW television and a fan favorite since her match against Britt. Kris Statlander has also had significant television time since losing to Britt in a great match at All Out. All in all, it feels like AEW is doing a better job of keeping as many women as they can on people's minds even after significant losses. To me, this is a good thing. Now, if only we could get Riho on Dynamite and Rampage a lot more often. And maybe the Killer Queens? Maybe? Please? 5. Champions aren't featured enough. This was largely an issue with Riho and Hikaru Shida during their title reigns, and to a lesser extent, Nyla Rose's title reign. However, since Britt Baker has been champion, she has been a permanent fixture on AEW television. This seems like something that should be 100% fundamental. You should feature your champion on a weekly basis, but it's been an area where AEW has sometimes faltered, which compounded the criticisms of the division feeling like an afterthought. But this is no longer the case, and with the TBS title tournament in full swing, we are likely on the cusp of another champion female face being featured regularly on AEW programming. Add in Britt Baker's main event figures to date, and it's clear the right steps are being taken. So, let's see. The AEW women's division is getting more time, more stories, and a more consistent spotlight on a weekly basis. The depth of the division's TV-ready talent has also increased, giving us characters and feuds we can confidently invest in. All in all, these are clear signs of progress. No, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and there's a lot of work to be done, especially with maybe the types of stories that they're telling, but for the first time in a long time, it feels like fans can dial down the cynicism a little bit and look towards the future of the division with hope and earned optimism. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and keep the conversation going in the comments. How do you feel about the current state of the AEW women's division, and how can it continue to make positive strides moving forward? Until next time, thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate it.